Next up, we've got the amazing Daniel Bowen from Nefta. Come on! He is amazing, and he's going to talk to us about embracing new technologies, which is a must-have for ad monetization and UA managers. Don't touch this dial. Put your bum on a seat and pay attention. Come on.
Lovely stuff. Well, first and foremost, hello everyone. Glad to be here at PGC. It's great to see some familiar faces in the audience as well. For those that don't know me, my name is Dan. I'm the VP of Sales and Partnerships at Nefta. And for those that do know me, I can see some familiar faces in the audience. And for those that do know, will know this is my first time doing a talk at any event ever. So I'm going to do my best to curb the nerves. I did have a beer at lunch, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But we'll see if we can get through this without too many bumps in the road. But before I dive into the presentation, just to get to know me a little bit and the reasons why I'm actually up here on stage today doing these talks for the first time, I'm just going to regale you all in a very short story about an experience I had at an event last year at Monetisation Istanbul, which I think probably quite a few people in the room attended, I imagine. Great event, lovely 2 days, good weather, much better than here. But anyway, so back to my story. So rewind to Monetisation Istanbul. I was in the meeting zone waiting for a client, and Mr. John Wright, who everybody knows, here he is, front and center. A lot of people know John, the big Viking, hard to miss. He made a beeline for me, as he always does. John's been a great champion of mine in the industry. I'm fairly new. I've only been in mobile gaming or ad tech for 2 years. And me and John have got along really well, and we've become friends. Anyway, he comes over, and we're chatting away, just killing a bit of time. And I see this guy walking towards me, and I think, oh, this must be the person I'm due to meet. So I tell John, time to get out of here, mate, I've got a business meeting. And as I stand up to greet the guy, he walks straight past me as if I didn't even exist, and goes and shakes John's hand very aggressively. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? And the guy turns around to John and goes, "You're John Wright." And I'm thinking, and John goes, "Yeah," and he goes, no, "You're the John Wright." And I'm thinking, what is going on here? And anyway, it turns out that he thinks John's some sort of Taylor Swift celebrity. And I was thinking, that's kind of where I imagine I'm kind of aiming to get to. So I want to be on stage more, so if you've seen me at events, that's the plan. I'm hopefully going to be doing more of these, unless this is an absolute car crash. But that's kind of my goal in mind, hence why I'm doing this today. So we'll dive into my presentation, which is embracing new technologies, a must-have for ad monetization and UA managers. And it kind of encompasses a lot of my passions at the moment. So my background is technology. I've been in the tech industry for 12 plus years, and advertising on top of that as well. And my role in the business at Nefta is to help ad monetization and UA managers. What we're going to be talking about today are sort of 3 core areas. ATT. Now, I know that's quite a pain point for the industry, so I'll try not to hang around on these slides for too long. But we'll also be covering first-party data done right, and also touching on AI, machine learning, and behavioral analysis. But one thing I do want to clear up straight away, I'm not an AI guru, I'm not a machine learning engineer, and I don't have a degree in behavioral science. So if you have any really difficult questions about those 3 topics, I'd kindly like to point you to Google for a more accurate answer, or speak to one of my colleagues at Nefta who are in the audience as well, be able to talk to you a little bit more about the machine learning models. My plan today is really just to kind of cover this as a surface level so you can understand a little bit more about the technology and how it's being implemented today. So as mentioned, ATT, huge impact on the industry. And kind of a benefit for me coming in fairly new with fresh eyes is that I didn't really have the baggage, I guess, of knowing what life was like pre-ATT, what the revenues were like for publishers, or how enjoyable it was in the advertising industry to know so much about users. I came in what you could argue is probably the crappiest time in the gaming industry, where in-app revenues were, for example, in-app purchases are down, ECPMs are down, which has always caused a big problem. But one thing that is kind of, I guess, the fallout of ATT, and something that isn't talked about often enough, I don't think, is opt-out rates. Again, something we're seeing so much now, and I guess it's an increase year on year, or as you can see by the slides, quarter on quarter, which is more people now opting out of tracking. And by the way, I'm obviously at Nefta, we do iOS and Android, but for ease of this talk, I'm just going to focus on ATT and iOS. But obviously there are similar issues currently ongoing now with Android as well, and Google with their Sandbox. But high opt-out rates on iOS that are impacting publishers' revenues, and for advertisers as well, all of a sudden not knowing anything about their users. So that's always been a bit of a problem, and what I find really interesting as well is on the opt-out side of things, it kind of reflects the mood of the public at the moment, which is we don't want to be tracked anymore, right? If you're given an option, track me or don't, we're always going to opt for the latter, which is all causing a huge problem for advertisers. All of a sudden, that big book that you had open of all the data points of, say, me, for example, you know, which apps I was on, you followed me from one to the other, you had a lot of different data on me. All of a sudden, that book has slammed shut, and now you know nothing about me. There is a solution, though. I'd be a pretty poor salesman if I wasn't up here talking about solutions and just talking about the problems. And that really is first-party data. And I've been saying it now for a few years. First-party data on its own, not to say it's a useless piece of information, because obviously it's not, but it doesn't really do much, or doesn't really help, certainly from an UA or an ad monetization standpoint, but bolting it on with additional technologies, which we're going to be covering in just a second. So pairing it with machine learning, for example, and AI, you're sort of taking something, this new form of data gold, if you will, which is first-party. So if we're looking at, and again, first of all, I don't want to make this a sales pitch, so if I mention in my company, I'm not trying to pressure you to work with us, although I'd love for you to. But we do a lot of this, obviously, at Nefta, again. So with our platform, for example, we offer like machine learning models, and we bolted on some AI to it as well, and we work with first-party data. But really cool to highlight some of the emerging technologies that are happening now in the industry. Machine learning's been around since the 50s, believe it or not. I actually had to Google that, I couldn't believe it. But there's lots of really cool things that you can do with machine learning now, and again, stuff that we do at Nefta. So conversion predictions, for example, or churn analysis. I was talking to a couple of people that I think are in the room at the moment, some UA and ad monetization people, about the churn prediction models and dynamic messaging, for example. These are new aspects, and I think I'm seeing more and more ad tech companies starting to, realizing that machine learning is a fantastic new piece of technology that we should all be looking at, but there's just so much more that it can do. The problem with machine learning, the only thing I would say negatively about it, is that it's slow, right? You have to feed it with data all the time, and the models take a while to train. That is the downside to it, but there is an upside, which is bolting on AI. And again, something we do at Nefta. The founders were super smart in realizing that there is all these amazing technologies out there, and individually, they do great, but together, if you combine them, they all of a sudden become like superpowers. So you've got first-party data, not useless information, but good information to have, but what can you really do with it? Feed the machine learning models first-party data, start creating different sort of models to obviously make them more accurate. And then if you add AI into it as well, then you start looking at behavioral insights, lookalike audiences, and on the real-time bid optimization, programmatic advertising, augmented reality. Artificial intelligence is, in my opinion, on its own in this industry, is fairly new. It's interesting to see how many different companies at the moment are tapping into it. And likewise with machine learning as well. And I think we all need to start looking at adopting these technologies. You know, Nefta, again, not to toot our own horn, but we were one of the first to realize that bringing all of these technologies together can start turning out, bringing something even better to the industry. But I guess one of the big questions is, how do publishers benefit from using their own game data? Well, from our tests already, and we've been going now for a couple of years, we're seeing a 20 to 30% higher eCPMs from opt-out users, and that's key, right? So your opt-out users are the ones that all of a sudden you've lost the signal loss, no IDFA, no fingerprinting, you know nothing about these users anymore. From an advertiser's perspective, there's no value attached to them. But now there can be with first-party data, and I think every single UA manager, ad monetization, a publisher should be looking at first-party data as the secret source, so improving ad performance and better user acquisition. And at the end of the day, connecting publishers and advertisers through standardization, I think I've sort of highlighted some of these already, but there are some really core components of this. So the last one that I wanted to highlight leans on existing and broadly used gameplay mechanics. So if you integrated Nefta's ad SDK, for example, you will all be very much aware of sort of like the game events that you can integrate. So a bit like game analytics, I guess. So then you start looking into understanding a little bit more about the user behaviors. So again, referencing Nefta's ad SDK, which can integrate via max mediation or level play as a custom adapter or direct integration. what you're adding is things like user progress events, spend events, or receive events. But one thing I love about this, I'm only really on the cusp of learning a little bit more about these sort of data sets that we're collecting now, as I'm fairly new. But it's amazing how it's almost like if you picture a decision tree and sort of you've got these three core components and how it feeds out almost like the roots of a tree. Because then all of a sudden you start looking at players completing levels on first attempts, on spend, it's things like repeat spenders, and with receive, you're obviously looking at competes and social contributions. There's so many unique data sets that you're learning from first-party data that you then obviously feed into the machine learning engine and then couple that with AI. I get asked this, or I did get asked this quite a lot. Last year, in fact, sort of how hard is it? What can we do? Could we do it ourselves? I think was one of the questions I got asked. So you've kind of got two options now in the industry. You've got to integrate with an existing ad partner, i.e. Nefta, please come and find me afterwards, or you've got to build it yourself. And what I would say to people that think, oh, we could probably do this ourselves, I would point them in the direction of anyone in the Nefta tech team or legal team and see how they're dead behind the eyes, because it is so difficult to try and remain compliant while building something innovative, disruptive, that works and can generate revenues for people. There's some really cool points here that I like to just sort of address: the scalability, complexity, security, compliance, and again, just sort of highlighting the compliance. That is the one issue. And I've worked in a number of different tech startups over the years, and the cool thing about working in tech startups usually is you get the flexibility to pivot slightly. You get a bit of breathing room. But I remember our founder Gishan did say something once, which was, we're building the toughest piece of technology in the toughest environment at the toughest time, and that couldn't be more true with compliant ad tech, because there is no real solution. There's no way of bringing you back to pre-ATT days without sort of remaining compliant, and that's what we've done at Nefta. So here's some snapshots of the platform here. So you've got sort of really good insights into, so from a UA perspective, being able to sign up to the platform and look at real in-depth behavioral insights on things like player spending, etc., and player earning, your ECM reports, etc. I would definitely recommend anyone to dive into these. And finally, I just would like to wrap up with a case study that I just kind of threw in last minute, because I wanted to come up here and, while waffling on about kind of what we do and emerging technologies and how awesome they are for the industry, it's always good to also talk about the success stories of this technology and prove to everyone in the room that it does work. That's the main thing here. So I can't talk about the publisher. It's not a, we're not actually technically allowed to be talking about this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm on stage, so Sodom. But we work with the publisher, a very well-known publisher, 100 million downloads, and we were able to increase ad ARPDAU by 5%, which might not seem like a lot in the grand scheme of things, but if we look at it in perspective, it was a very small share of voice in not many geos with a lesser title, and we were still able to move that needle up by 5%. And what I love also about this case study is the opportunity. So this one here, with case studies, you tend to, get this is what we did and this was the numbers. But one thing that really kind of solidifies that our tech really does work is the fact that the publisher in question has not only added more titles, they've opened up more geos as well. So it kind of shows again that the fact that we were able to add or increase ad ARPDAU by 5%, they're like, right, this definitely works. So integrating our ad SDK, understanding the first-party data, grouping those behavior patterns into different cohorts, and then from a UA standpoint or for advertisers, all of a sudden the price of that user then obviously increases because there's a lot more value attached to them. I can't believe I actually got to the end of that presentation. Is that like 5 minutes? Jesus. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. Obviously, this is my first time doing this, but I hope it went well. Cheers, guys. Thanks very much.
How do you feel? That's my big question. Oh my God.
So good. Thanks,
how did he do?
Cheers,
Don't
guys.
move.
Oh God, no.
How did he do? 5 out of 7? Yeah,
Cheers,
not
guys.
bad.
Yeah, it wasn't that great.
Has anybody got any questions for the amazing Daniel Bowen from Nefta?
Please, God, no. Get me off stage.
Any questions about what Nefta does and how it can improve your results, which it can?
I obviously did so well that there's no question.
No, this is a good thing.
I know. I'm going to take that away.
Good.
I'm going to take that away from this. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate you. Let's give it up for you again.
Thanks, guys. Thanks very much.
Make a big sign.
I'm going to go get a beer.
Another one.